Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Paola Martinez. I am an Impact Fellow, which is a fellowship funded by Schmidt Futures. And I am here with Dan Jarratt, who is the head of learning science technology at Infinite Campus. And Dan submitted to us an idea for a data set that he has for our call for actions. And we're here to learn a little bit more about it. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan.
Oh, it's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, we would love to use this time just to learn a little bit more about your idea and have the audience become more familiar with it. So I will just ask you a set of questions. We wanted to start off by just having you explain to us a little more of the idea for your data set and what the world could learn from it if it were created.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I represent Infinite Campus. We are an education technology company based in Minnesota, and we build a student information system, a learning management system, and a student payment system for the US K-12 market. We're the second largest company in our sector, and more than 2,000 school districts in 45 states have purchased our system. And that holds the data of 8.2 million currently enrolled students and more than 130 million student years of historic data. Infinite Campus has existing relationships with a highly heterogeneous set of student populations and education agencies at all levels. Student information systems are the system of record for education microdata collection. School districts put data into our SIS to make communication easier between staff members and families, to make compliance and funding and accountability reporting easier, and for trend analysis for continuous improvement. This is a lot of data. For example, a single large school district, Louisville, Kentucky, stores 330 million scores of students' homework assignments. I mean, that's just one database table for one of our customers. We've got 1,700 more database tables for 2,000 more customers. Schools collect a huge variety of records related to teaching and learning and school administration. Infinite Campus is the custodian of this granular, longitudinal, hierarchical data. And we use stable identifiers and no data archiving or purging to ensure that that data is high quality. So this means that the same person identifiers appear in school and course enrollments, attendance reports, transcripts and gradebook entries, home life and mobility records, assessment results, and many other information domains. So we hold the microdata from which data owners report out to stakeholders. Our customers' data belongs to them, and this personally identifiable information is protected by state and federal law, such as FERPA. Now, our dataset idea for this workshop follows from work in the US Census Bureau and elsewhere on new data privacy techniques that afford useful, de-identified aggregate datasets that are derived from protected PII. Infinite Campus already created a prototype dataset of student records that we've used internally to build a machine-learned school dropout early warning system. So this de-identified proof of concept dataset covered 6 million student years of information from 32 states. Now, with philanthropic assistance, Infinite Campus will create sufficient privacy and security layers to begin working on datasets like this with education researchers. Now, there's a big difference between a public benchmark dataset like ImageNet and what is possible in the education domain. But we are making big strides towards research-friendly, multi-domain, multi-state datasets that can still foreground the critical requirements of student data privacy and security.
Awesome, thank you so much. And so I was also wondering, you mentioned that you would be able to create sufficient privacy layers to make this available. I was wondering if you could delve in a little bit more into that and how that would work.
Yeah, absolutely. The critical privacy question is, can an individual student be re-identified? And so our goal is to have an independent audit be able to confirm that in fact in this data set, no individual student can be re-identified. We then have proof that we are following federal law when it comes to student data privacy. That's why we have not yet released such data sets to external researchers. We've only used it internally because that's all we have the right to do today. But we are moving along the path towards these technologies. What the US Census Bureau is working on is differential privacy, and it may be that that's the exact technology we'd be working on.
Mm.
That's still unclear, but the core
Mhm.
requirement is de-identification, likely through sufficient aggregation. Now the question is, what information is lost in the transformation from a microdata, which the PII, the highly protected information. When you transform that to an aggregated version, you need to keep enough signal to have useful insights, but you have to add enough noise to ensure privacy. I mean, that's the trade-off. That's what differential privacy is meant to do. And so we need to be able to measure that and report out to independent auditors and to our customers and to researchers.
Got it. Okay, cool. And yes, so another thing I was curious about is, why do you think that now is the right time for this data set? And has it been something like this been attempted before? And if so, why has it not come to existence?
It's a very good question. This sort of multi-year, multi-state, multi-domain data set doesn't exist because the legal and technical challenges are simply daunting. Now, first, let's talk about legal issues.
Mm.
Education agencies own their PII. They completely control its use. So to access student PII, you must sign a data use agreement with each agency. Infinite Campus has signed such agreements, but we have a limited scope of what we're allowed to do as a vendor. Our rights normally extend to using de-identified, aggregate, or anonymized student records for research and development to improve our products. So that means that when we work with education researchers, we must provide technology transfer of insights back to the classroom. Otherwise, we have no right to even be looking at the de-identified data. And we have to show that this product improvement is to improve instruction in our customer school districts. An example here is that we're clearly prohibited from using such data access to do marketing or sales, that sort of thing, only to improve learning outcomes. Now, fortunately, that's really good news for education researchers, because the research community is really good at formal evaluation, and they're looking for dissemination of their work. And we're required to do that in order to provide this infrastructure. So second, there are major technical challenges to collecting and comparing student records across the country. If you get data from a single school district or state, you are waiting on their budget and their timeline. My local district here in St. Paul, Minnesota, put a moratorium on all new research data requests because their backlog was too big. There was a researcher who I was talking with who was looking for state data, and this researcher waited for 1.5 years to get a single data set that was from a state agency. That's a really long time to wait. And when you get the data sets, values are localized to each agency. So Infinite Campus's perspective is that we ought to prioritize this data integration problem, because that's upstream of research and analytics, certainly upstream of what the machine learning community would be looking to use. So your best shot as a community is partnering with existing K-12 vendors to instrument their platforms for research and insight dissemination. So in an ideal world, the research community would be looking for partners, vendor partners with certain qualities. You'd be looking for administrative and learning records together that are interoperable and as close to real time as you can get. You'd be looking for a large market footprint with a heterogeneous set of schools and students. You'd be looking to centralize and standardize data across states. You'd need high levels of data security and privacy. You would need existing engagement with K-12 agencies and legal agreements for data use, and the actual ability to train people to use new workflows to implement new practices in schools with fidelity. And then finally, if you're lucky, you're going to have vendors with an interest in experimentation and open science and reproducibility and what the community cares about for doing good science. There are just not that many vendors who fit the bill. So I'm here because over 27 years, Infinite Campus has built the country's best system for large-scale K-12 education data analysis. And we're learning how to build infrastructure to support the research community. And I want to give one example of this. We're the second largest US K-12 student information system, but we are the largest to use a single common database schema for all of our customers, for all years, for our entire product line. So that means that our student information system is our learning management system. It's got a common code base. It's got a common database. So that means you can write a single, simple database query, and you can compare administrative and learning records across schools, across time. And in fact, most of our data is longitudinal. We've got a built-in time series. They've got start dates and end dates on these data values. And it's a relational database. We built it that way because that fits how schools are arranged. So you can write a query like, for a particular course, look over all of the sections of that course and find all of the students who are chronically absent and who have more than 2 missing assignments and who have moved household addresses more than twice in the past 5 years. That capability is incredibly rare among edtech vendors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that does seem extremely powerful. And so sort of to that end, I wanted to drill on just quickly two points that you mentioned. So you mentioned that it would require high levels of security and privacy. And I was wondering if you could just really speak about what you think could and could not be public.
Yes.
In the data set.
Right. So ImageNet is powerful because it was a public data set. It could be used for benchmarking, and it catalyzed research because it was widely available. That's because the source information could be made public. Education data is simply not like that. Student data privacy is paramount. We've got many laws around it, and we know that our customer agencies own their data. So that means that simply making a carbon copy of ImageNet is really not possible in the education data domain. So we're trying to go along a legally protected path towards working with education researchers, but still staying consistent with our agreements to our customer agencies and with state and federal law. So I talked a bit about what the de-identification and aggregation layers might look like.
Mm-hmm.
Other layers include where the data can live. You know, ImageNet could be publicly available on the internet, downloadable to any machine, and you can hack together some machine learned applications. That's just not generally possible with student information system or learning management system data. In general, the data has to stay with the vendor, and the vendor can provide access in a limited capacity. To date, that limited capacity has been virtually nothing. It's been really expensive for researchers to spin up agreements with edtech vendors who then have had agreements with education agencies. We are working to reduce the marginal cost of asking new research questions by investing in this research infrastructure and broadening the number of researchers who can have access to that. So in the near term, the answer is still not that many, but in the medium and long term, we want that answer to be quite a few. And so we're working on things like reproducible legal templates. You know, where right now spinning up a new agreement between us and a research organization takes a long time. but we are making this templatable so that the next time we do it, it's less expensive. And the time after that, it's even less expensive. And the marginal cost goes down. We're also working on benchmark data sets within our within this warehouse of research data. Right now, we have real-time data streaming in from our customers, and that's great for a lot of applications, but it's not great for benchmarking. And so we're also thinking about the research needs of the community from a benchmark perspective to say, if we find a particular insight based on a particular data set, can another researcher a year from now or 10 years from now come back and use that same data set? Or what did the data look like on that day to try to reproduce a finding or to try a new approach?
Mm-hmm. Awesome, wonderful. And just as closing thoughts, I was wondering if you mentioned that it would unlock this data set would unlock the possibilities for tremendous amounts of experimentation. And I was wondering if you could just close off by telling us the sort of creativity that would be unlocked for researchers, the sort of questions that they'd be able to ask, and who would be most impacted by the work that would come out of this data set.
Right. So in fact, the who would be impacted, I think, has to come first. The only right that Infinite Campus has to work with education researchers is if insights are delivered back to our customer education agencies through technology transfer. So that means that these questions have to focus on the very real needs of students, teachers, families, and administrators. And the delivery has to be through the lens of the affordances and constraints of a student information system or a learning management system. So the good success story here is the machine learned school dropout early warning system. We published that in Educational Data Mining 2019, if you want to go take a look at the paper. We co-designed those new data workflows with the Kentucky Department of Education to ensure that what this new big ML system was going to do was aligned with the very real problems of practice in our customer districts. We then built the machine learning pipeline all in-house that used this national data set. And then we improved our school counselor module to show risk predictions and explanations. Then we rolled out the technology nationwide, and it's been adopted by several states and even Clark County, Nevada, which is the 5th largest school district in the country. So when we prioritize our own work, we ask ourselves, does it streamline educational processes? Does it promote collaboration? Does it personalize learning? And does it improve learning outcomes in American public education? So we know the research community shares our mission to transform K-12 education. And so especially with the machine learning community, we want to achieve the transformation at scale.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for taking the time to chat with me today. And thank you to everyone in the audience for listening in.
Oh, it's really nice to be here. Thanks for the time.
Likewise.